bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for blessing each of us who are here to make decisions in the best interest of the boys and girls of the state of Louisiana. We pray that you give us the wisdom, the guidance, and the knowledge to move forward and make those decisions for our children, as all children deserve a quality and positive education. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Item 5 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Adding emergency agenda items 15 through 18. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, that's fine. I said I approve it.
Do we have a motion? Do I have a motion? And a second? By Ms. Bradford. Any objection? Motion approved.
Item 6, approval of the minutes of the September 16, 2010.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lee, second by Ms. Dasty. Any questions or objections? So moved.
Item 7, consideration of election of board officers for 2011.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Romer.
Yes, before I nominate the officers for 2011, I want to thank you, Mr. President, for serving. You and I didn't always agree on how to get to a solution, but you always worked with honor, and I enjoyed working with you, and I look forward to working with you still in the future.
Thank you.
I'd like to nominate for 2011 officers the following slate. For President, Penny Dastug. For Vice President, Jim Garvey. And for Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Glennie Bouquet.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the officers who have currently served. It has been a pleasure working with Walter, with Luella, and with Keith in his role as president. And I'd like I'm glad that it seems as if we're going to have a unanimous decision here, because one of the things that this state needs and this board needs is for us to be on one page and on one accord and to work together as a body. So I'm hoping that that's where we are today, and that is how we will move forward. I know that there have been some concerns about what we're doing, but let me tell you, the children in the state of Louisiana are the only concerns of this board. And I'm talking about the children from the northern end of this state to the southern end of the state. Not just the children in the southern end, and I know I represent a lot of the southern parishes, but we are very concerned about all children and of improving the quality of education for all of those children. So I look forward to what we're going to do in the coming year. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I have one. I want to thank all of you for the honor. I wouldn't say that it was always a pleasure, but an honor of serving as president. And I'd particularly like to thank Jeanette Vosberg and her staff for all the help and assistance. Those are fine people, folks, and the state of Louisiana is very fortunate to have them.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Bailey.
I'd just like to thank you for your statesmanship at times when it was a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So anyone else want to speak? If not, any objections? So moved.
Item 8, notices of intent.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take an item out of order if it's okay.
Okay.
It's the number 16 on the emergency agenda, because I'd just like to do something that's pleasant right now. Back in early September, the President of the United States declared October as the National Principals Month. And that's why I'd like to take that item out of order.
And the item, Ms. Johnson, is number 16 on the emergency agenda, consideration of endorsing October 2010 as National Principals Month in Louisiana.
Do I have a second to move it?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Any objection? Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you very much. We have a proclamation that we would like to present to the Louisiana Principals Association, and it reads as following. Whereas Louisiana's future depends upon a well-educated society, schools produce the next generation of citizens who contribute to a healthy and prosperous society, and whereas principals are dedicated to their students' ongoing academic and intellectual development. Principals work to provide a positive support system to empower their students and to give them the tools they need to succeed. And whereas principals are responsible for providing instructional leadership and professional management in our schools, this leadership is second only to classroom instruction among all school-related factors that contribute to what students learn at school, according to research conducted by the Wallace Foundation. And whereas principals are responsible for the safety of their students and staff and the security of the school, principals maintain school discipline and develop communities of engaged learners with their schools. And whereas principals set the academic tone for their schools and work collaboratively with teachers to develop and maintain high curriculum standards, develop mission statements, and set performance goals and objectives. And whereas principals lead the way in making schools accountable to students, parents, the community, and other stakeholders, each principal is responsible for fostering a dynamic partnership between the community and the school in order to create a positive learning environment for students. And whereas the month of October 2010 has been declared National Principals Month and is dedicated to recognizing the significant contributions of principals and enthusiasm they have for providing quality educational experiences and guidance to their students. And whereas the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education recognizes and appreciates the skill, dedication, and commitment of Louisiana principals and the challenges they face daily. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education designates the month of October as National Principals Month in Louisiana, recognizes the contribution of principals in the success of students of Louisiana elementary and secondary schools, and honors and commends Louisiana's principals for their continued services to the children of Louisiana. And it is signed by the president of this board, Mr. Keith Geist, and the person who will receive this is Ms. Mona Miller. So will Ms. Miller please come forward, and I'll give this to the, oh, here he is, to the president. Congratulations.
Ms. Miller's in my district.
Well,
I want to take just a moment, if I can, to personally thank my principals that I had, who, as you can imagine, tolerated me and managed to get me through school. Mr. Gerald Johnson, I was one on the record in high school, Dr. Phil Haley in middle school, and Ms. Liberto when I was in 3rd grade. So I thank them for seeing me through.
Mr. Chair,
Since we're
I'd
doing
also-
this, go ahead, Ms. Bradford.
I'd also like to say thank you on behalf of principals, and Mr. Bennett joins me in being recognized.
That's correct. We have 2 principals on the Bishop Board.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
point of
Dasty.
personal privilege. I'd like to take this moment to welcome Stafford Palmieri. Is that correct? Stafford started this week in the governor's office as his education policy advisor, and I can tell you that I am just thrilled to know that you are here and will be available to us as a liaison between the State Education Board and the governor's office. Stafford comes to Louisiana from the Fordham Institute for Public Education Policy in Washington, D.C. We are thrilled to have you on board, and we want to welcome you, and we invite you to all of our meetings. Thank you.
Welcome to Louisiana. Okay, I think we're back now to the agenda items.
Item 8 on the agenda, notices of intent duly advertised in the, for 8A, July 10 issue of the Louisiana Register and ready for final adoption, items 1 and 2. And for B, August 2010 issue of the Louisiana Register and ready for final adoption after November 18th of 2010, items 1 through 9.
Move approval.
I have a motion by Ms. Bouquet. Do I hear a second? By Mrs. Bradford. Any questions? Any objections? So moved.
Item 9, report by the State Superintendent of Education.
I think Mrs. Tyler will be giving this report today. Mr. Pastrick is enjoying the honor of seeing one of his sons sworn in as a new attorney today. So with our blessings and best wishes, he's there to enjoy that. Mrs. Tyler?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm very pleased to share with you this morning the superintendent's report regarding some of the department's latest news and happenings. We also wanted to recognize the principals in our state as being honored this month during National Principals Month. Of course, we had some other things we wanted to say before Ms. Johnson came with her proclamation, so I'll still say a few things that Mr. Pastorak would like to say to honor our principals. We know that principals are among the hardest working, yet often least recognized individuals in education. I myself was a principal, so I know firsthand what they do each day. Principals set the academic tone for their schools, and it is their vision, dedication, and determination that provide the mobilizing force behind any of our school reform efforts. Secondly, as part of the outreach from our department to the education community, we held the Leadership Summit for Superintendents, at which the majority of local superintendents gathered to dialogue and receive information around the implementation of our state's vital reform efforts. As a result of the encouraging discussion held during the summit, we established Tiger teams to ensure local superintendents have a real opportunity for input and collaboration as it relates to new education policies and implementing new legislation. Additionally, the department held the inaugural seminar for first and second year superintendents. During this seminar, we provided new superintendents with information on the services and support the department offers. Each superintendent was also assigned an LDOE partner to interact with during the beginning period of their tenures that will help them navigate the department's resources. These new superintendents were also assigned a fellow superintendent who would willingly discuss local issues and initiatives that have proven to be successful. I'd like to also briefly touch on some news that I'm sure you are aware of. Over the past decade, academic achievement in Louisiana has significantly improved. For the third year in a row, the state's growth in baseline performance scores are the highest earned since Louisiana's accountability system was launched in 1999. Over the last 2 years, the state's baseline score has improved by 7 8/10 points, a significant achievement. Now we're able to boast a baseline performance score of 91.8, an all-time high for our state. This remarkable growth can only mean one thing: our schools have improved. In fact, the number of schools earning a school performance score of 100 or higher grew significantly from 361 schools in 2009 to 423 in 2010. Over a 2-year period, the number of schools that hit the 100 SPS mark increased by more than 40%. And when our schools improve, overall district performance rises. With this year's release, we've noted that the percentage of districts who earned a DPS of at least 100 has doubled. In 2008, only 13% of our districts earned a DPS of 100 or more. In 2010, 25.7% of our districts earned a DPS of at least 100. These extraordinary achievements could not be possible without the dedication and commitment of outstanding educators and students statewide. And on behalf of the entire Department of Education, we'd like to publicly express our appreciation for their hard work. At this time, I'd like to bring up Mr. Chris Meyer, who will present the board with some additional information and context regarding the progress of Louisiana schools over the last decade. Chris?
We got it working, Chris? Is it working?
Not sure. Morning, board members. Let's see.
You received a handout. I think we've received a handout of the information. So.
Yeah, and we apologize to the members in the audience. We'll try to get this fixed up. I think with your new conferencing and streaming system, it's probably coming through, but let's see. We'll go ahead and get started. I think we We actually spent earlier this week, board members, with the Accountability Commission, and we shared some of this data. And as you know, last week we presented the results of our performance scores, as Deputy Tyler just said to you. And one of the things that the superintendent felt strongly about this morning was to sort of take a step back and look at where we've come over the last 10 years, because it's quite remarkable, especially for those that have been around in this work for the past decade and really led to where we are today. And so we wanted to take a few minutes out of the meeting this morning to celebrate where we've been, and then also talk about some opportunities moving forward. So the first slide that you had in front of you really shows that it's because of the accountability system that this board established 10 years ago that has made the difference in Louisiana public schools, that has really provided that impetus to support our educators, support our principals in leading to this change. Because once we were able to sort of diagnose where we were, it forced a lot of people to strive and get better. And as you can see, every time we've raised the bar, we've had more schools meet that bar. We've had more schools that have come out of academic unacceptable status, and that's something that's quite significant. In fact, you know, when we started, if you look back to 2000, 2001, when the academic unacceptable bar was 30, you had 313 schools that fell below that. But if you look today, we only have 43, and that's quite a remarkable accomplishment. In noting that you just raised the bar again to rise at the end of this year to 65, and then next year to 75. So it's clear that by holding schools and districts accountable, our schools and districts have responded. You also notice that over 10 years with our school performance scores, we've risen nearly 30 points. And that's something that this growth nationally, and Stafford, who's just joined us today, who's the new education advisor to the governor's office, can tell you from a perspective at a national level, this is remarkable what's happened in the state. Certainly we're not satisfied with where we are, but this is remarkable growth that we've seen over the last 10 years, and that's something that we should absolutely celebrate. This graph here causes a bit of concern for me personally as a student who grew up in Louisiana public schools, but also then a lot of hope. If you look 10 years ago, if you were an African-American student in Louisiana, you basically had a 1 in 5 chance to be at basic on mathematics. A 1 in 5 chance, and all of us certainly look at that and think it's appalling, but look at what's happened today. 10 years later, more than half of our African-American students are basic and above in mathematics, and in fact the gap between white and black students has closed considerably. In fact, it's one of the fastest closing rates in the country, that we've closed the gap both in math by about 11 points, and then you'll see in English the same thing has happened. We've closed the gap by about 11 points, and that's not just in races, but that's also in terms of economic status. So that's something to celebrate. It means that because we've looked at the data, because we've had a focus on what the data shows us, that's caused us to respond accordingly. Now, this graph's great because what it shows is that where our schools are in the state, their performance, we're seeing an increase on the right-hand side of the graph, which are that's the good areas. Those are the increasing levels of stars, which soon may be letter grades or these other sort of labels. But the point is that we're seeing a growth in the number of schools that are higher achieving, and we're seeing a decrease in the number of schools that are lower achieving. And that of course, is what we want to see. Could it be a faster rate? I think that's why we're all here, and I think that's why we've done a lot of the reorganization work at the department, because we want to keep pushing schools and districts faster, and we know they want the same thing. But again, this is something to celebrate. Now this is an interesting graph. What you all created this year was a group of labeling of schools called the Academic Watch List. And as you know, we are rising to the academic unacceptable bar being at 75 at the end of next school year. And so what you all said is you wanted to have a zone of schools that we should all pay extra attention to. Because we're not just satisfied with schools getting to 61 or to 76. We want to keep continuing to help all of our schools achieve the highest they possibly can. So we created an academic watch list so that we as a department, you as BESTI members, our school communities could understand where are our schools and which schools do we need to provide extra support to. Now, what we've noticed is by doing that, roughly 60% of the schools are really contained in about 6 LEAs, but even more importantly, about 40% of the schools on this academic watch list are in 3 LEAs. 3 LEAs contain about 40% of the schools that are below 75. And that's really important, not to call them out in sort of a public humiliation way. It's a way to say, wow, if we know that 3 districts have the majority or near preponderance of schools under that list, can we concentrate resources differently in those schools? Those 3 districts are Caddo, East Baton Rouge, and Jefferson. What we've done and what we've thought about here at the department, and you've heard some of this at your last meeting, we'll continue to hear, is we've focused our supports, our new services around helping districts get better and improve themselves. And one way is called the Trailblazer Project. The Trailblazer Project and Trailblazer districts really spawned from, and this is in our Office of Innovation, really spawned from what we did in Race to the Top. And you know, the funny thing is even after we didn't get Race to the Top in round 2, we'd created this Louisiana Education Reform Plan that had these best practice ideas, these tried and tested ideas for reforming schools and helping districts improve. We actually had more districts sign up after we heard we weren't getting any money that said, we still want to do these things. You know, we may not be able to do all of them, we may not have all the money to do them, but we think these are best practices and we want to do more of them. And more districts are interested in trying out those ideas, and we already have a pilot underway with 5 districts across the state. But you'll notice on here, and we've put asterisks on them, it's a little hard to see for the audience, but of those 3 big districts, 2 of them, Jefferson and East Baton Rouge, have committed and are in the Trailblazer initiative. We're hoping Caddo decides to join. The next district, Rapides, we're hoping Rapides decides to join this, because we think these are great ways that we can partner together in supporting one another to get our schools and districts stronger. All right, so the celebration list, the top 10 highest ranking districts in terms of DPS scores. Any surprises there? Yeah, Orleans made tremendous growth, and I think what we start to see with these as well is these are districts that, again, as we think about partnerships and leveraging resources, that these are districts we can study and really investigate more as a state on what's working well and what's not. These are the most improved districts, so these districts had the greatest increase in growth over this last year, and that's something as well that we're concerned with, we know you are, is not just absolute performance, but are we always getting better year in and year out? Now this chart shows the percentage of schools within districts that are meeting their growth targets. And so this is interesting because if you notice number 10 on this list, so the 10th top ranked district only has about half of its schools meeting its growth target. Now, that, again, something to celebrate. That's a great thing that these schools are meeting their growth target. But what we noticed this year in Louisiana, we only had about 1/3 of all of our schools actually meet their growth target. And that's something that if all of our schools are meeting their growth targets, we know that as a state, we're going to meet our growth goal. Now, this is an increase over where we were last year. Last year, we only had about 1/4 of our schools meeting their growth target. But still, there were about 800 schools in Louisiana, 824 actually, that did not meet their growth target this year. And so that's something that we want to, again, focus on and figure out what are the causes underlying why they didn't, and what could we change to help them actually meet those targets. Yeah. And finally, and I think this sort of puts it back into perspective of really what we're talking about. We started off this presentation saying that it's because we have raised the bar, because you've had the courage to raise the bar over the last several years, that schools and districts have responded. We raise expectations, students respond, we raise it, and districts and schools respond. But even at SPS 75, that means that still half the students in the school are below grade level. And I think that's still the sobering challenge we have, is that, you know, at what point will we be satisfied? And I don't know that anybody's satisfied that half the kids in a building being below grade level is acceptable. And all of our districts keep pressing and finding ways to get better. And so this is where we wanted to leave you, is that while we want to celebrate what happened this year, again, the highest growth we've seen in our state's history, the highest performance we've ever seen in our state's history, we know we can do better, and we want to continue to have conversations with you about how that happens and how we can serve our districts and our partners out there and everyone improving their game. Thank you.
We want to thank Chris for that information, and at this time, Betsy members, this will conclude the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. Are there any questions of anyone regarding the report? Well, Chris, we thank you. Ms. Tyler, we thank you. It's a good report. We appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, the Board Administration Relations Committee met on Tuesday, and I recommend approval of items 1 through 13, noting that number 8 is a read.
Right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. A second by Mr. Lee. Any objections? So moved.
Number 8, on the motion of Ms. Bradford, second by Ms. Dastu, the Board Administration Relations Committee deferred until the Thursday, October 21st, 2010 board meeting, consideration of statewide proposals for fiscal year 2010-2011 LA Portal LOPSFA. Further, the committee asked the State Superintendent of Education to provide a recommendation on Thursday, October 21st, regarding the 2010-2011 AG funding and the vision for the future of the LA Portal.
Good morning again. Ms. Johnson, at this time, Mr. Pastorek has come to the board with a recommendation that we simply redirect those funds to the Literacy and Numeracy Office, whereby we're able to help enhance services for districts through the numeracy effort. So the recommendation is that we're asking the board if they will approve us and allow us to move the funds from the e-portal to the Literacy and Numeracy Office, whereby numeracy will receive the funds to help us engage with the STEM throughout the state.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I have a question.
Ms.
And it's
Johnson?
probably for our staff. Do we have to do anything because we were in a 5-year agreement with the Board of Regents? Is there something that we need to do?
We would just need to notify them that they will actually LOSFA now that they're not going to receive the funds.
Okay.
Which we can do without, we can do that in our office.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Romer?
Yeah, is there a timing issue? I mean, I don't disagree with what your recommendation is, but for the sake of perhaps understanding the reason for the move, is it necessary that we make that decision at this moment, or could it be moved to the next board meeting where we could look at it longer? I'm just curious.
We were hoping that we could do it as soon as possible because of the cuts that we're having to endure in the department. There is going to be a tremendous cut to the literacy and numeracy effort, and we're hoping to be able to continue to serve districts and schools along those lines.
Okay, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any objections to the motion? So moved.
10B, Finance Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, I move approval of items 1 through 25, noting item number 24 is a notice of intent, and pulling item number 11 for a technical correction, and item number 23 as a read.
I have a second by Mr. Lee. Any objections to that motion?
Okay, I'll first go to item number 8. Do I need to read the entire item? 8. I'm going to start with 8. Okay, here, board members, this is the St. Helena hearing motion, and the motion was that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education recommends that the reasonable certainty of St. Helena School Board not having sufficient revenues to meet expenditures and for year 2011-2012, and the reasonable certainty of said board not to be able to resolve its status as financially at risk, as defined by Bessie, be submitted to the Attorney General, Treasurer, and Legislative Auditor. And this is the technical correction by the State Superintendent of Education, according to RS 39-1351, so that the need of a fiscal administrator to oversee the fiscal matter